Hello, all my happy Crumpin' Wargamers out there. Today is the day we are going to learn all about the trixiest of elves, the Eldar themselves. This is going to be an Eldari faction focus. I'm not really going to be going over Harlequins, and I'm not going to be going over the Inari that much. I will talk about the Incarn just a little bit because it's awesome, but basically, I'll talk about some of all that stuff in a separate video. So this is just the Eldari that we're talking about right here. So we're going to get right on into it. If you enjoy all these tactical videos where I talk to you about how an army functions, how to beat it, how to play it, then please give me a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more amazing content. All right, so we're going to dive right into it. What are we talking about today? Well, we're going to be going over unit profiles. I'm not going to spend a crazy amount of time on each individual troop. I'm just going to talk in depth about the units that really, really matter. Like, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes on Eldar Guardians. You guys got it. They're basic line troops. They have one little trick. Okay, so we'll blow through most of those fairly quick. We'll talk about, really, we're going to spend most of the time talking about the psychic dominance and how the Eldar army actually plays. They have some really good stratagems that they can use, and we'll be going in depth about that. I will also be taking time to show you on TTS how some of their strategies will actually work. So when I say that I hate playing elves, I mean it. Because elves be tricky. Okay, and I actually think that Eldar are in contention for the best army in the game right now. My personal belief is that the only reason we don't see Eldar winning super majors is because they are very mentally exhaustive to play, and if you make any mistakes, you get horribly punished for it. So Eldar probably do a lot better on TTS, or Tabletop Simulator, than they do in real life, because on TTS, you're in more of a sense of calm. You have your area. Typically, we don't use clocks as much on TTS, although I wish we would. And people have more time to spend thinking and not making mistakes. But on the tabletop, I think they're a harder army to play. If it wasn't for the difficulty to play them, I would say that they're probably, if not the best, very, very close to the best. I do notice that when I play orcs, I tend to either annihilate the Eldar or the Eldar annihilate me. There's almost no middle ground there. And when I run my Custodes, Eldar struggle into Custodes, that's for sure. But overall, I think they're a great army. They're very strong, but they have the fact that they are hard to pilot. That really helps to balance them. So I think they're a fair army, even though I do think they're very strong. So let's get into it. That was enough ranting and rambling. Let's start talking right now. So what are the Tricksy Elves' super strengths? What do they really have going for them? They have an absolutely oppressive psychic phase. Their psychic phase is incredible, and we'll go over why that is, but essentially they're going to have a crazy amount of casters. They have abilities to get additional points to their cast, additional points to their deny. They have abilities to cast without being able to be denied. They have abilities to move after they cast, so they just dominate the psychic phase, and we'll talk a lot about some of their spells here in a little bit. They have absolutely superb mobility. They can and will get to wherever the heck they want to get without anything you can do about it. Like, you can't stop them. They are just so fast. It's amazing. They have some really, really crazy good synergies for the units, whether that's with a stratagem or generally, boosted by psychic powers, which we'll talk about. Their damage output, when you read their data sheets, you're going to be like, oh, they don't do any damage. You're wrong, because they do a crazy amount of damage. It's just everything about their army is layers upon layers. So this psychic phase boosts this shooting phase. This shooting phase boosts this fight phase, for example. And we're going to talk about all those things. They do have very powerful characters, although that's not to be confused with having very powerful beat stick characters, because they don't really have super powerful beat stick characters, except for a few exceptions, and we'll talk about those. And then they have a super powerful pregame, because they have a 2 CP stratagem that gives them a 3 redeploys. And remember, they also, maybe not remember because I haven't told you yet, but they also have a ton of infiltrators. And they also have a vehicle that can be basically mimic a drop pod, so it can come in turn 1. So they do have a really strong pregame, and it's really strong. All right, so let's talk about what the weakness is. What are the weaknesses of these elves? Well, if you look at them next to the Raven Guard right here, they're small and they're fragile. They die easy. It's not hard to kill them. It's not hard to kill them. They will crumble if you sneeze at them. The trick is getting to sneeze at them, because using their mobility strategies, they've got like fire and fade. They've got basically every model in their army can more or less move after it shoots, and it can get tricky to get to them. But if you do get to them, they will die. They also have lower model count armies, because their models are relatively expensive. Some are still a little cheap, in my opinion, but it's okay. And then they also have what's called arguably poor secondary choices. Now, they do have one secondary that I am very adamant about is amazing, but I do understand that overall their secondaries are ish, very ish. All right, so let's talk about the army rules, these special armies rules. What are the Strands of Fate? The Strands of Fate is a special ability. So at the beginning of the phase, they're going to roll 66. And each of the dice roll is going to correspond to a specific roll they can use in the game. So if they roll a 6 on that Strands of Fate roll, they can use that 6 any point in time in the following battle round, their turn or your turn, to change any, and this is not a reroll, but it just changes, or it'll just automatically turn any dice roll into a 6. So let's say I hit you with a a 12 damage shot coming from what's that called? The Shadow Sword from our guard, but it doesn't ignore invulns. Well, the Eldar player could be like, oh, well, I really don't want to die, so instead of rolling this dice, I'm just going to use a 6. It's kind of like a miracle dice, a little bit, right? Now and it counts as a 6 to roll, so their invuln save passes and they don't die. So 6s are going to be saves, which can make them very, very durable in certain phases. Let's say they roll 4d6 or 4 6s on their Strands of Fate roll. Well, suddenly they have 6 auto passes for saves. Pretty cool. 1 will be an advance, a 2 is a charge, a 3 it counts as a 6 for a psychic test. So basically they can auto pass any psychic ability they want. A 4 is a hit, a 5 is a wound, and a 6 is a save. So they have the ability to manipulate all their rolls. So if they know they're going to be trying to do a deep strike charge, they can guarantee it if they roll a 2 or 2 2s. So very, very good flexibility in predicting the outcome of certain really important rolls that they need to make. Battle Focus. Battle Focus is a really cool rule that almost every model has. Not absolutely every model, but most models have, where they do not suffer the penalties for shooting if they advance. However, if they choose not to advance, after they shoot, they can move d6 inches. And that is -3 if moving over terrain. So, for example, they can peek out. They can move their 7 inches because they all have relatively fast. And they can shoot you, and then they roll a dice, and if it rolls a 5, they can move 5 inches back into cover, as long as they don't pass over terrain. Because if they pass over terrain, they are at -3 for that roll. But yeah, so they have the ability to, all of them, or more or less all of them, always move after shooting, which is really strong. Then they also have the Shuriken Weapon rule. The Shuriken Weapon rule means that if a Shuriken weapon, which is most of their infantry's weapons, wounds you on a 6, it's at +2 to the AP. So very, very, very good. All right, traveling players, what is a special rule? This is the ability of the Eldar to take allied patrols of Harlequins. Allied patrols of Harlequins are very exciting. They're very, very strong. I positioned this text box a little weird. That's why it's a little annoying. Sorry about that. Well, you guys can read it. But basically, they can take a patrol of Harlequins, and that does not break their own faction abilities. So the Harlequins can come in, and they can use their faction abilities, and the Eldar can come in, and they can use their faction abilities. It allows for some really cool interplay between the armies, and can make things a little bit interesting for the players. The Inari, which is a specific type of Eldar, which this is not a focus on, but they can take both Eldar, Dark Eldar, and Harlequins. So they have a lot of flexibility in their list building. Let's talk about the Exarch powers. Exarchs, which would be like the sergeants of their aspect warriors, they have the ability to take like a unit upgrade, which can make them really, really strong. And I'll talk about those upgrades when we get to those relative units. So if they get any power upgrade, though, they're going to receive an extra wound. If it's a Striking, Sweeping, Howling Banshee, Shining Spear, or Warp Spider Exarch, they also get an extra attack. And if it's a Swooping Hawk, Fire Dragon, or a Crimson Hunter, and Dark Reapers, they get +1 to the Blizzard skill. So having a unit upgrade on their sergeants actually gives them a lot of powers, and it can make things a little bit confusing. Just like, oh, you didn't tell me all your relics. Well, they have a lot of interesting things with their unit sergeants. Now, we have some individual craft worlds. I'm not going to go too in-depth against most of these because kind of like for the Gene Stealer cults, the custom traits is really the best way to run them. But there are some interesting things. So if you run a individual craft world of Ulthwé, basically every Psyker is going to get +1 to cast on the first cast. This can make their Psychic phase insane. They get access to Eldrad Ulthrad, who is probably the best caster in the game. And they also get a 5 against mortals and a relic for an undeniable cast. It really does allow for a very impressive Psychic phase. And some people do use Ulthwé. The other ones generally aren't run competitively, but you might see them in casual games, and you might find someone who runs them competitively. It's just pretty rare. But for your LA talks, they get to ignore movement modifiers and gain cover when they're a certain distance away. Nothing else really special. Biotons get to reroll 1 hit roll per activation. They have a relic for an extra Psychic cast. Let me just introduce that. And then we have E-Endin, which mini armor contempt, so they ignore AP 1 or 2 the first AP of AP 1 or 2 weapons. And then they have a relic for +1 attack to Wraith units. So if they're running Wraith units, you could potentially see Eandon. I just kind of doubt it. And then Samhain. This is something that I kind of think could be seen because they get to reroll the charges. They get to fall back and charge. They have a stratagem for advance of charge. And they have the Warlord trait and Relic combos to really make a true beat stick character. This might actually be seen, but I think it's probably pretty rare still because we have the far-flung Craftworlds. And there's a lot more options available for the far-flung Craftworlds, and you can go read through those yourselves. But the ones that really matter is you've got what's called Swift Strikes. And what this does is it allows you to count as remain stationary in your shooting phase unless you fell back. This is so important because remember what I said about battle focus. So basically what this allows for is it allows for every unit in the game, in the army, essentially to advance, shoot, suffer no penalties to shooting with an assault weapon, or they can still advance and shoot their heavy weapons, and then they can still make their battle focus move afterwards. The mobility it provides is just absolutely bananas, and it's very, very strong. You can pair this with Children of the Open Skies, which gives you an extra blip to your movement, or 2 extra blips for movement if you're a flyer. And it makes your advances a minimum of 3. So those two tend to get paired together. And there's a few other options. Sometimes they'll do like a reroll 1 hit roll per activation. But those are both very, very good. Then we also have the Hail of Doom. Now this is the majority of what you'll see from competitive Eldar players. Hail of Doom will make a 6 to hit count as a 6 to wound with a shuriken weapon. And remember what I said, with shuriken weapons, a 6 to wound counts as AP +2. So what they do is they fish for 6s to hit, auto wounds, and has an AP of like 3 or 4 depending on which unit is shooting. It's very, very strong. Hail of Doom causes a crazy amount of damage. Let's talk about the Psychic phase. This is the oppressive Psychic phase I've been alluding towards. So the Psychic phase is going to be divided into a couple of different paths. You have the Warlock Psychics powers, which is going to be the Runes of Battle. The Harlequins, which is the Phantasmancy, which we won't be talking about today. And then we have the Farseers, and they have Runes of Fate and Runes of Fortune. So let's start on talking about the Runes of Battle. These are a mix. So they're maledictions and blessings. So each ability has 2 sides, and they can choose which side they want to cast as warlocks. Now, warlocks have a special ability called Seer Council. So if they're warlocks on foot and they're a unit of 4 or more, they can cast 2 powers instead of 1. And if they're on bikes, if they have a unit of 3 or more, well, I think 3 is the maximum. So if they have a unit of 3, they can cast 2. So Conceal Reveal. It goes in a warp tribe of 6. If you use the conceal side of it, it gives light cover to a core unit. If you use Reveal, it removes light cover. It's got an 18-inch range. So it can be very useful for helping to focus down an enemy target that's receiving the benefits of cover. Embolden/Horrify. So Embolden is +2 leadership and fights first on your friendly core unit, which can be very useful. Horrify is -2 leadership and fights last, which is generally more useful. And that's a warp charge of 7. So they have the ability to give fights last through their psychic powers, which is super strong. Enhance and Drain is +1, -1 to hit. So if you use the good part, it's +1 to hit. If you use the bad part, it's -1 to hit. Or the bad part, the negative part, I guess. Protect and Jinx with a warp charge of 7, +1, -1 armor saves. It does cap, so you can't take them to better than a 2-up armor save. You can't take them to worse than a 6-up armor save with it. And then we have Quicken Restrain. Quicken Restrain is within 18 inches. This is very, very strong, and you'll see this in almost every single list. You can make another unit do a normal move, an advance, or a fallback. Now, after they do this, they can't shoot or charge. What this allows for is the most reliable psychic interrogation or warp charge in the entire freaking game. It's insane. Restrain, on the other hand, will have the movement and make it so units can't perform an action. And if they were doing an action, they automatically fail it. So that can also be very useful. So I'm just going to kind of show you. I'm going to switch to the TTS outlook right now just so I can show you just how freaking amazing this is for doing some certain psychic. So this is the TTS table. And let's just go ahead and show the area denial there. So if you're going to cast warp charge, you're going to have to get a model within this 6-inch circle so that they can actually cast warp ritual. Well, what the Eldar player has the ability to do, let's just say this guy's a warlock over here, and this guy's a farseer. So let's say the farseer takes his bike and he comes into the middle and he casts warp ritual. Well, now he's exposed and they're just going to get to kill him. Not so, because the other warlock over here is just going to go ahead and cast Quicken on him. And so now this jet bike can pick up and move his 22-inch advance all the way back here. So he moves up, casts Warp Ritual, and then the other warlock. I know these are just not scripted, so forgive me the names on them. So then the other warlock back here is just going to cast Quicken. So you pick up this guy, and then you move them 22 inches because they moved 16 inches with a 6-inch advance, auto advance on bikes, and now they're completely safe. So they can get any psychic interrogation. Let's say they wanted to come here so that they can see the character. So they psychic interrogate my kill rig, and then they go, boop, bye. So now I'm not exposed anymore. So they can get these psychic abilities with these psychic secondaries without really risking themselves at all, which is immensely powerful. And then we also have Empower, Innervate. And this is also very strong for +1, -1 to wound. +1, -1 to wound is typically much more impactful to the game than +1, -1 to hit. And it's very, very strong. So those are runes of battles. And you can see how, remember, they don't have to worry about casting these because if they use their Strains of Fate dice on a 3-up, well, they can more or less give themselves an auto cast of 6. So they can use 1 for a 6. The other dice roll has to be a 1. It's pretty awesome. Now, Runes of Fate, these are for Farseers only, not for the Warlocks. And Farseers are going to be like the Lords or the main characters. Warlocks are kind of characters. So all these are going to have a 18-inch range or a 24-inch range if it's cast on a certain amount. And remember, they can more or less auto-guarantee that they're going to get these cast. Guide, cast on a core or a character unit, they get to reroll all hit rolls. Crazy powerful depending on what unit use it on. Doom, choose an enemy unit, and then all coring characters from the Eldar army get to reroll wound rolls against that unit. Unbelievably powerful for trying to focus down that one critical unit. Fortune, if it casts on a 6, but if you cast it on a 10, it goes to 24-inch range. Gets a 5-up Feel No Pain for a core character unit. Okay, that core character unit now becomes fairly hard to eliminate, which is very, very cool. Executioner. Now, this is a really cool ability for just annihilating lower model count or lower wound count units. So it's going to be D3 mortar wounds. If a model dies, they suffer another D3 mortar wounds. It's like a much better smite, and 18-inch or 24-inch, depending if you can cast it on a 10 or not, which many times they can. Will of Assyrian, they get to choose a core or a character, and it gains OBSEC. Then they can also do actions and shoots, and they auto-pass morale tests. So it's a really useful ability that you see less than other psychic tests just because it's typically less impactful for the game, but it can they can come in handy extremely, especially if you want like a unit of Shining Spears, which are their more heavy-hitting cavalry units, jet bike cavalry, that can go on in and give them OBSEC and they can take an objective while they're killing elite units. Then you also have the Mind War, and this is just kind of a mortal wound bomb that I'm not really going to detail very much because it's pretty typical. All right, then we have the Runes of Fortune. This is also another psychic tree that the Farseers get. They have Fateful Divergence, gain 1 CP. That's pretty darn easy. We always like CP. Then we have Witch Strike, which is add 1 mortal wound to wounds from a target model. So let's say you put it on a Autarch, which is like their captain, and the captain wounds you 3 times. Well, you get 3 mortal wounds in addition, which is pretty good. So it can really it can be quite good, especially if you cast it on a character like Karandris, which is terrifying. Ghost Walk, it's 12-inch range. Core or characters add 2 to the charge. So they have many, many ways of guaranteeing charges, essentially, because they have Strains of Fate dice. They have the ability to advance and charge with some of their units. They can add 2 inches to the charge. It's very, very consistent movement shenanigans they have. Crushing Warp is a mortal wound bomb. Focus Will. This is really important. At first glance, it doesn't look that good, but it's real darn good. Focus Will. It adds 2 to psychic test or deny the witch test to a model. So you want to make sure you guarantee that you get the psychic interrogation or that warp ritual or that quicken to protect the unit. Wow. Okay. Definitely very strong. Impair Senses turns off a unit's ability to benefit from auras. This could actually be really useful. Let's say you have a death bomb that's going in and you're relying on them to have reroll all hit rolls from or reroll all hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of 1 from a character. Well, they can't benefit from those auras anymore. It can make them much less effective. Very strong. Characters. All right, so we're going to move on into the characters. And let's talk about these Farseers, which are casting these spells. So Farseers are really cool because they cannot suffer perils of the warp. This makes them real strong. They never have to worry about double 1s. They never have to worry about double 6s. They get 2 casts, 2 denies, and they can be on a jet bike for a massive 22-inch movement. So they're going to get wherever they need to go. So Eldar actually, they're still quite happy with Psychic Interrogation many, many times. They and Demons, I think, are really the only 2 armies that like Psychic Interrogation anymore. Then you have the Autarch. This is the captain kind of character, and you don't see him that often. Not because he's not good. It's just he tends to not fit with the style of the army that a lot of people are playing. But he can be kitted out to be pretty killy, and he can actually have a lot of utility as well. He has one interesting ability where he lets you use the command reroll strat twice in the same phase, which I don't know, could be cool. He also gives you reroll ones to hit in 6 inches to core, and then depending on how you kit him out, he can be fun. But there's nothing in there that's super scary that I really need to talk about. Let's talk about the Avatar Arcane. This guy is awesome. He is expensive, but he's a beast-stick. He's got a 4-up invuln, and he halves all damage received, which is exceptionally useful. Then if you stack that, what was the spell that causes a 5-up against Field of Pain? Fortune. You use Fortune on him, so he can have damage and have a 5-up Field of Pain and a 4-up invuln. This guy can actually be extremely difficult to kill. He's got some pretty darn good melee. He gets a damage 2 sweep and d6 plus 2 damage strikes. So he's very, very, very useful. You don't see him very often because there's just better ways to play Eldar, to be honest with you, but he is really cool, and I know Stephen Box made a really cool list, and he did quite well with it. I think was it LVO? I don't remember. It might have been LVO, though, but he took a really fascinating melee Eldar list, and it was very hard-hitting. He also allows reroll charges to all core units around him, which is pretty cool. Phoenix Lords. These are some of the biggest flavor for the entire game, and let's just mention them real fast. So they're all phase capped. So every single Phoenix Lord that they put on the battlefield is phase capped. 3 wounds per phase. They all have 6 wounds. So they are annoying to kill because they also have Lookout Sir. And when you have Lookout Sir and your phase capped, it can be very challenging to deal with, though. They're all strong, and they all provide obsec to their respective aspect warriors. Okay. What does that mean? That means Baharoth, who's the Phoenix Lord of the Swooping Hawks, he gives obsec to Swooping Hawks. He's also obsec himself because he is a Swooping Hawk. So they're real problems. They also all have the benefit of a stratagem where you can spend it, and on a 2-up, they stand up after they die. But you can only use that once per game. So let's talk specifically about these Phoenix Lords. These are the unique individuals. So you have Asterman. Asterman is the Phoenix Lord for the Dire Avengers. He has a 3-up invuln. He has damage 3 in melee, and he causes D3 extra mortal wounds on 6s to win. So he actually messes you up in melee. He is a tough man. And being phase caps, he can be a problem. Remember, he provides obsec to the Dire Avengers. He's a pretty cool guy. Then you have Fuegan. He's the Fire Dragon, or Fire Drake Phoenix Lord. He's actually a toughness 5 elf. Very impressive. He's got a very strong anti-tank weapon. Besides that, it's just what he is. You don't see him very often. Jane Zar. She is the Phoenix Lord for the Howling Banshees. She turns off Overwatch. She makes enemies -1 to attack in melee. Then she's still a Howling Banshee, so she's +1 to wound when she charges. Basically has every rule in the game. Corandrus. Now, this guy is a problem. This guy is an infiltrator, so, 4 deploy. He also causes 2 mortal wounds on 6s to hit. The problem with that is he has a sweep attack, and his sweep profile is like 12 attacks, and you can cast Fortune or a guide on him for rerolls. So he can fish for the 6s and just annihilate things with mortal wounds. He's a big problem. Yeah. So he's tough. It doesn't work against vehicles though. So the way you counter him is you use vehicles. Magan Ra, he's the Dark Reaper guy. He's one of the coolest characters in the entire lore, and unfortunately, he's just not that good in the game right now. Then Baharoth. Barry is the biggest asshole in all of Warhammer 40,000. He probably causes the most amount of grief and rage quits of any character in the entire game. Even more than my Blade Champion. If you haven't seen my Blade Champion video, look in the link below. Go check him out because he is a huge headache. But Barry is worse. So after battle focusing or consolidating, he can teleport anywhere on the battlefield that's 9 inches away from an enemy unit. Battle focusing or consolidating. That means this guy hits you, and then he consolidates and disappears before you can hit him back. I hate this model so much. He's also on the 24mm base, so you can't screen him out. He's always going to be able to score behind enemy lines, and then he's face caps. Oh my gosh, the irritation this guy gives is just unfreaking believable. Now, the way to counter him, actually, is you hope the Eldar player doesn't activate him first, which they always will. But if they mess up and they don't activate him first, you can base him. And if you base him, then he will not be able to consolidate, which means he's stuck in melee. That's the way to counter him. Unfortunately, our overlords for the WTC, which, by the way, I love the WTC, I really do, but I think this is a stupid ruling. It allows him to consolidate even if he's based, and so he can always teleport away. It's really stupid. I kind of despise that they put that in their rule set, but, it is what it is. But for normal match play, you can still base him and counter that. All right, the Incarn. I'm not going to talk about the Incarn, I think. It's an amazing model, but it's for the Inari, and I'm not really talking about the Inari right now. Screw it. We're here. I like the Incarn. He's awesome. Remember, you'll only see him in an Inari detachment, which is very similar to Eldar, but we'll just talk about him because I did put him in the slides. Oh well. He's a massively disruptive death bomb of a character. When any unit, friendly or enemy, dies, the Incarn can teleport 1 inch away from that last model in the unit to die. Basically, what this means is that anytime anything dies, he can teleport there. Unlimited. So there can be 6 models or 6 units that die in a turn, and he can teleport to each individual one of them. Now, if he does teleport, he can't heroic or charge. So there is that. But he can still cast spells, he can still shoot, and he's a very potent caster, and the also has a really good shooting attack that hits all enemies in range, which is, I think, unique in the game of Warhammer. Now in melee, he's a beat stick because he ignores invulns. He's like strength 14 or strength 10, I think. He ignores invulns, very, very strong, D3 plus 3 damage, and he also halves all damage with a 4-up invuln. So pretty hard to kill. Very interesting and cool character. Maybe I'll talk about a lot more about him when I do something specifically on the NRA, but he was just here, so he's bonus for you. Warlord traits and relic combinations. Now, this is one of the areas where the Eldar are weaker. Not saying that they're useless, but they're weaker. Their warlord traits, by and large, kind of suck, and their relics are more or less irrelevant. There is one combination that everyone needs to be aware of. It's super, super strong. Typically, they're going to put this on a Farseer on Jetbike. It is Kurono's Bow. It's pistol 3, and every single successful wound is 1 mortal wound. This can combo with the warlord trait, Mark of the Incomparable Hunter, which says a wound roll of 6 causes 1 additional mortal wound. So essentially what that can happen is they can take their pistol, and let's say their Strands of Fate dice, they rolled 3 hits. Well, it's a shuriken weapon, so those 3 hits can be used, and then suddenly they count as 6s to hit, which also count as 6s to wound, which causes 6 mortal wounds in the shooting phase. It can get actually a little bit nastier because they can spend a CP for a stratagem called Bladestorm, which causes 6s to hit explode. So they can spend 1 CP for 6s to hit explode, and then spend 3 fate dice to cause 6s to be auto wounds. So basically what happens is it's going to cause 6 mortal wounds, and then the other ones, they'll just roll the 3 explosions to see if those 3 explosions wound. And if those exploding hits actually do wound, well, that's going to be up to 3 more mortal wounds, unless they roll as a 6 to wound, in which case it would be 2 extra mortal wounds. So there's the potential of this one pistol doing 12 mortal wounds in a shooting phase, which is freaking awesome, and it's really a very, very cool combination. And I'm not super upset with it because it's kind of their own combination, their only combination. Out of that, there's really no other warlord traits that really matter, and outside of Samhain, which has their special ones, which we won't talk about because no one's taken Samhain. And then there are other relics that they're going to see. There's one called Falsho's Wings. This is cool to put on Autark because it's going to give him a 12-inch movement and give him fly. And then when he flies, boom, he can fly over a unit and they can take D3 mortal wounds. So it's kind of a cute little trick, and you might see it. And then you have Sunstorm, which is for bikers only, and it gives them a movement of 20 inches and OBSEC. This you very well might see because suddenly that Farseer who wants to advance, instead of advancing 22 inches, they advance 26 inches. They cast Warp Ritual, then a Warlock, makes them move 26 extra inches somewhere else. It's kind of silly just how fast these guys get, and the OBSEC's always nice. But more or less, that's kind of it. Now, what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to go through stratagem supports, and then I'm going to end up breaking this video into 2 parts, and I'll do like all the units separately, and then I'm going to do a lot of the strategies, how the Eldar play, and how to counterplay them in a different video. So let's talk about some of these stratagems. A huge, huge strength of the elves. They have Phantasm, which is redeploy 3 units before the first battle round begins. So they can deploy on the line, and let's say they end up going second, then they just redeploy behind cover, and they're completely safe. Or they deploy very passively and defensively, and they end up going first. They spend their 2 CP, boom, they're back on the line, they're ready to rock and roll. The redeploy strategies are amazing, and the Eldar love it. Then they have one, this is a very cool stratagem, it's called Linked Fire. So you have 1 Fire Prism, and he has, and if there's any other Fire Prisms within 12 inches of them, and we'll talk about this when I get to the Fire Prisms data sheet. The first Fire Prism can gain an extra 2 attacks. Basically, it channels the other Fire Prism, so they both shoot through 1 model, and then it ignores invulns. Let me just switch to the tabletop view so I can kind of show you what this looks like, because that might have sounded a little jumbled. So let's take the Fire Prism, which is this model right here, and let's say he is here. And I'm just going to copy this model. So we have 2 Fire Prisms, and only one of them can see this kill rig right here. And put them right here, and it's the wall phase, and we really don't want to mess with any We don't want to mess with any types of invulns because the kill rig's got an invuln. So basically, he's going to get 2 shots with his strength 14, AP a bunch, high damage weapon. So what we're going to do is they're a 3d3 damage weapon. So he's only got 2 shots with it. But we're going to spend 2 CP for the Stratagem Linked Fire. And so suddenly now he's going to get 4 shots with it because he's within range of 1. If I had another Fire Prism here, he could get, 6 shots with it. But now those are going to ignore invulns, which now he's going to get 4 shots that are going to be hitting on probably 3s. And they're going to be wounding on 2s or 3s. And they're going to be D3 or 3 D3 damage each, ignoring invulns. It's actually very cool. You don't see it very often because I don't see anyone really running Fire Prism spam. But it's a super cool ability that could absolutely come into place. And I want you guys to be aware of it when you're playing against the elves. Because I want the elves punished. Because I hate the tricky elves. I don't actually hate the elves, but... No, that's not true. I do. I despise the elves. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. Matchless Agility. Reroll the Battle Focus move. So... let's say you shot and then you're trying to move back behind cover and you just don't roll high enough. Well, they allow you to reroll the Battle Focus move with this 1 CP stratagem. Lightning Fast Reactions. -1. It's 1 CP. It's -1 to hit this unit. Very useful in a variety of situations. We always love being -1 to hit. Blade Storm. This is awesome. 6s to hit, explode with shuriken weapons. So if you're trying to, for that Farseer with the Kronos bow combo we were just talking about, you can use this to get a bunch of mortar wounds. If you are rolling this for Dire Avengers, who are going to have a crazy amount of shots, as we will see, this can give you a crazier amount of shots, especially with rerolls to hit. All right, cool. What are some other really cool stratagems? They got Fire and Reposition. Ignore terrain for a battle focus move. Let's say you're going to move over terrain, and you're like, crap, I'm going to be -3 to this move. Have I actually demonstrated how the battle focus works? Actually, let me just go back to the table real quick, and I'm going to demonstrate how that battle focus moves real fast for you, because I feel like that's something I should do. So, essentially, let's say these rangers are right here, and they're going to shoot my kill rig, pew, 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 so they all shoot them. Well, afterwards, they get to roll 1d6. 3. So now they can officially move 3 inches. But... if I wanted to move through terrain or like this, they would be at -3. So what this would allow is it would allow a unit to stand right here, completely shoot what the stratagem we're talking about. It would allow this unit to stand right here, shoot the kill rig, and then roll 3 for their battle focus and just move straight through the wall without having to be at -3 inches. Because typically they would be at -3 for moving through, which would mean they just couldn't move at all. But Battle Focus is really, really cool. It also allows you to say, move, shoot, roll a Battle Focus roll, and then move even more if they want to move block. This is a nightmare for move blocks. We hate these move blocks because then the orc player is just completely locked to their deployment zone and can't get anywhere. So Battle Focus is very strong because every unit in the army can more or less do it. Not actually every unit, but enough where it's super frustrating. All right, anyway, so that was going to be our Fire Reposition. Let's talk about the next one, which is Avengers Asturian. If you have lost a model, this Dire Avenger unit can shoot twice, can shoot again this turn. This is so darn strong. Fires twice is extremely powerful in this game, and Dire Avengers are an extremely powerful unit already. Getting them to shoot twice is gnarly, and it will annihilate things. Unparalleled Mastery, which make 1 extra psychic cast. Let's say your Farseer cast 2 spells, and you also really want to smite. 1 CP, throw your smite out. Multifaceted Mind. Perform a psychic action and cast 1 psychic power in addition. So we really want that Farseer to be casting Warp Ritual, but we also need to get a guide off. There you go. Phoenix Reborn. On a 4-up, the Phoenix Lord can come back to life at the end of the battle phase. All right, so I think I said 2-up earlier. It's 4-up. Sorry about that. Battle Psychers for 2 CP. Gain both effects from a Rune of Battle. So let's say we're trying to cast Conceal to give your unit light cover. But we also wanted to remove light cover from someone else. 2 CP right there. Boom. You get to give yourself light cover and turn off light cover for someone else. This is the last page of the stratagems. Then we'll start talking about more units, I think. All right, so the stratagems. Seer Council, 1 CP. A Farseer gains +1 to cast when next to a defined unit of Warlocks for the rest of the game. Very useful for getting additional, more reliability on your psychic powers, because that's what Eldar need, even more reliability. Feigned Retreat. This is fallback and shoot/charge. It's 1 CP if you just want fallback and shoot, or if you just want fallback and charge. It's 2 CP if you want fallback, shoot, and charge. Very darn useful. Forewarned. Makes it really difficult just to ever tag anyone. Forewarned. This is their ability of Auspex Scan. So one unit, they do have to be within 12 inches of a Farseer. It can shoot an enemy unit that comes in from reserves if they're within 18 inches. So they have a longer range than Auspex Scan, but they do have to be within 12 inches of Farseer, which is not really hard to make. But this is a very good ability, and it can absolutely mess with deep strike shenanigans from the enemy. Tears Visha, you get to gain D3 wounds back onto a Wraithspear unit, which is your Wraith Lords, your Wraith Guard, your Wraith Blades, things like that, which we will talk about very soon. And then we have Fire and Fade. Fire and Fade is a unit's making a 7-inch charge move after shooting. So it's shoot and scoot, baby. Make your movement, shoot. Then say you don't want to mess with a praying for a 6-inch battle focus move. 7-inch. You suddenly get your 7-inch move. Very, very strong for keeping your elves protected. I'm going to go ahead and pause right here, guys. We're going to call this part number 1. In part number 2, we're going to start talking about your troops, your elites, all those. And I'm going to start talking about the secondaries. And then we'll show on TTS View exactly how we're going to actually be playing against the elves and playing with the elves. And I'm going to show you all the shenanigans they get. I love you, and I appreciate all your attention so far. Part number 2 will be posted fairly shortly after this one. I just have to get to something right now, and I'll get that recorded up for you, and I'll have it posted. If you have any questions or comments or concerns so far, go and post them down in the comments. I will address them. And until next time, all of you beautiful gets, happy crumpin', you beautiful wargamers. Bye-bye.